So in this video I'd like to discuss a building called Aldar HQ in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, designed by MZ Architects, constructed 2007-2009, opened in 2010. I think this is a good example of how ancient geometry, architecture and these principles are being used in the modern time by modern architects who like to portray themselves as very much computer age, but are in fact hiding something, hiding these ancient elements in their modern artwork and sort of taking awards and praise for it, I think, without giving due recognition and full knowledge to the public. Now, just to quickly go through what makes the building quite special is that it's a round building, and the original concept was to have a circular disc-shaped high-rise. However, the concept was too unstable and it would fall over. Of course, a building needs a foundation. So the immediate solution was to bury a portion of the circle, but to make it stable, moved it too far away from the original concept. So the challenge for the architects was to find a way to have a maximum disc above ground with minimum foundation below the ground. And they solved that problem with the pentagon, the pentagram, or with phi. A few years ago I would have paid very little attention to this, and I would have laughed it off probably if someone had explained it to me. I was introduced to these ideas through Secrets in Plane by Scott Onstott and also Randall Carlson. They're recommended channels on my YouTube page, but I'll also try to remember to put a link in the description. But what we have here is the ancient world, and these ancient hermetic / occult / esoteric principles are still in full use on a global scale, on citywide scales, but also in architecture. Aldar HQ being an excellent example. So it's not just out of a sentimentality that they incorporate these, it was actually a very practical solution to a very modern problem. So in the typical presentations, I'll very much give it a computer type of feel, but this is so much compass and straight edge. The computers are mostly there to do accounting work. The actual the fundamental of the design come from compass and straight edge geometry. It's an idea based around the idea of harmony, harmonic design, in where the 7 liberal arts, especially the 4 higher, astronomy, geometry, arithmetic and music, are all brought together and united through not just the city design, but especially through building designs. Now, sacred and ancient proportions, but they're constantly being resurrected in a digital age. Now, people like Norman Foster and I.M. Pei are lauded as masters in their fields of architecture, and the documentaries, the biographies, and most of the presentations will give them a very computer age futuristic view, but 100% they are using these ancient principles that's hidden in plain sight. The measurements, the proportions give it away. I should say that I.M. Pei or Norman Foster were not directly involved in this building. Now, so Aldar HQ, the concept, the solution which was unacceptable, and then the ultimate solution was to use a pentagon as the foundation, and the circle, the disc of the building, would enclose. This gives the building the maximum above ground but maximum stability as well. This pertains directly to the golden section and phi, the golden mean, divine number, etc., etc. But it's much more than this. So firstly, this geometry, I've just cut it out. So we have the 6/5, the hexagon and the pentagon. It's one of those recurring themes, and that's a story in itself. But this is the actual basis for the larger part of the building. Now, for instance, we have the pentagon, But if we flip it, I've made a drawing just to show, and now we have hexagons, which is the framework of a building. So the foundation is a pentagon to give it maximum strength. But we also see the framework, which not just looks good, but it's actually very, very strong, is this hexagonal based. And it's just a series of hexagons. If I cut this better to scale, it would fit to the millimeter, but you can still see how it works. So we have the frame, which is hexagonal. We have the building and foundation, which is pentagonal. But it goes much further than that. And okay, so let's first. So I've done a recreated Albrecht Dürer sketch of the pentagon. So here we see the circle of a building and essentially the pentagonal points, which give it its strength. Now this immediately is phi proportion, because the base of the building is 1 in proportion to the diagonal, which is phi. Now if I was to continue, this would also of course be phi, but if I continue that, you can see we get the pentagram, and hidden inside the pentagram is a whole other series of phi. It's phi and phi and phi all over again. The pentagon is a beautiful shape for that reason. Now there's another important point about the pentagon, and is that this is 108 degrees, and that the heart angle is 72 degrees, and therefore this outside would be 252 degrees. So 72, 108, 252, and the opposing would be 288. So I'll just mention these numbers, we'll get back to them later. So we have Aldar HQ, we have a very modern, sophisticated building with ancient solutions to these very modern problems. But we can also, now I'll bring up, I'll use some graphics. So another important point is that the building, if this is ground level, and we have the height of the building, it is 360 feet, which is equal to 60 fathom, 120 yards, 240 cubits, 480 span, or 1080 hand. Here we have a second reference to 108, 1440 palm, or 4,320 inches. So we have these numbers which are sometimes called the harmonic numbers, which refer to the Pythagorean scales. And just a reminder, so we have 360, 60, 120, 240, 480, 108, 1440, 4,300. We draw just to go back to what I've mentioned in an earlier episode. I'm just going to draw a vesica Pisces roughly. And we have the rhombus inside the vesica, which is made of 60 degrees, 120 degrees, 240 degrees, and 300 degrees. 120 degrees equals 1440 minutes. So I have Vesica Pisces, 60, 120, 240 degrees, 60, 60, 120, 120, 120, and 240 and 240. However, if 240 degrees is also equal to 1,140 minutes on the compass, 1,440 palm, 1,440 minutes. 144, I mentioned that this is an essential in this building design. It refers, amongst other things, to New Jerusalem, and it's a global thing as well. But 120 degrees equals 7,200 minutes equals 432,000 seconds on the compass. 4320 inches, and we see the second reference to 432. 300 minutes is equal to 300 degrees is equal to 1800 minutes, or 10800 seconds, 1,080,000 seconds. 1080. So we have now these might be called coincidental and not important. Also we have, but the pentagon degrees is not so important as for height. So we have linked through the vet, but this is not the only one, because as a proportion, the vesica is 265 high by 153 wide, which gives it the proportion of the square root of 3. 153 being the number to focus on for a moment. So just to refer back, we have the Vesica Pisces and the rhombus. Here we go to a drawing and we see that those proportions of 265 wide by 265 high by 103, which is the square root of 3, are encoded in each of these rhombuses, which is just, you know, if you build the rhombus, you build it in there whether you like it or not. However, there is a plan to that, because if we now focus in on each rhombus, and firstly let's for a moment, let's just ignore those and focus on the rhombus itself. So what we have now is a series of small rhombi, but we also have, for instance, 1, 2, 3. Wherever the lines intersect, we have an intersection point. Okay, so this rhombus has been designed in such a way that it has 81 nodes, intersection points there. Why is 81 significant? Very important to the moon, but first 81 is 9 squared, or 3 to the 4th. However, if we now extend these lines down, we now get a triangle, and each one of these smaller triangles consists of 36 nodes in itself, so 36 being 6 squared, giving us in total 153 nodes for each section of each triangle. You sort of see how it interconnects there. Now, if we again add those, but I don't want to go too deep into that for the moment. But this rhombus itself is a proportion of 153 to 265, and the number of nodes that is in this is 153. Now, 153 triangular. Let's go to the Louvre in Paris, designed by IMP, who I mentioned earlier, who very reluctantly admits to his ancient inspirations in his use of fire in his designs. The Louvre Pyramid, we have 153 rhombi on each of the faces, excluding the entrance because the entrance is broken. However, that's another story in on itself, because that, depending on how you count, but the original count was 666 in total on the whole Louvre Pyramid, but 153 most definitely is built onto 3 sides. But we'll take note of 666. Now, that's the Louvre having 666 is, there's a bunch of people who will try to disprove it, and they make a good case, I have to admit. However, when we look at the, let's go, the total floor space in Aldar HQ is 666,000 square feet. Now how's these numbers, which are so intricately connected, begin to match up? Coincidence goes out the window. If you want to argue this is coincidence, I'm not sorry to say, I'll tell you loudly, you're a fool. Because this is not just this building, and it's not just a connection between the Louvre, because if we go to the Grande Arch, the Grande Arch in Paris, what is the height of that? 363 feet. We see a repetition of these. Both those buildings are on the axe historique, and they are both 6 degrees off alignment. 6 degrees off alignment. Again, it's this thing that gets repeated over and over through city design. Even researchers into this often call it an accident, but it's not, because it's in Winnipeg, in Sydney, across the Americas. It's just part of the plan, and once you see it, you'll find that it is everywhere. This cannot be coincidence. Full stop. So now we have 660,000 square feet. We have these harmonics. We have references to 153, not just in proportion, but by the design of the number of panels in glass. Now, so we're in Paris. We have the Grande Arch being the same height. We have 153 being repeated in this rhombus pattern and framework. And we have the hexagon and the pentagon being firstly the fundamental proportion of how we bury how much of a building is to be buried, but also in the framework. So I would contend from beginning to end that this building is 100% built on and based around the principles which are called sacred geometry, and which is considered like a new age weirdo thing, if you want to say. Let's be frank, that those people have no fucking idea what they're talking about, or if they do, then there's something much worse than them. But these are architectural facts in the modern world which connect exquisitely to the ancient world, and we find them unbroken throughout history, except for a period, except for the Dark Ages, which we're familiar with, but also the ancient Dark Age. This architecture in temple and city design drops out, but then it re-emerges back again. So I think I've covered it, or at least what I want to cover now. Firstly, that the geometry itself is a solution to problems. It's not some sort of sentimental, purely religious thing. It's science. Let's just be frank. It's science, geometry, and math of a foundation of sciences, and these proportions are built into the cosmos, into the microcosm, into the macrocosm. They just are. You just open any physics, chemistry book and you'll see how these patterns and these proportions rule so much of nature. It might have been a nice coincidence with the geometry that a pentagon and phi so nicely gives us proportions between what we need for foundation and what we can have above, and how to build those foundations. But as we move on, these things cannot, the framework hexagonal, it's beehives, it's strong. Of course, if you can build with it, you'll build with it. This doesn't have to be esoteric. However, that they go to such efforts to incorporate these, to repeat these numbers again, just a quick reference to the Louvre and to the Grande Arch in Paris. It does extend much further, but I don't want to list hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of buildings in dozens and dozens of major cities around the world. So 153, 666, 6120, these are all from the Pythagorean tuning scale. 432, 108. For instance, okay, I'll put up a little graphic on the importance of 108. 432, this is effectively the radius of the sun. And, sorry, I forgot a zero here, it's 1400. That would equate to 8,600, 400 seconds. 8,600, 400 miles is the diameter of the sun, above 99.94%. And then even the official measurements, most people will be very quick to reference them, but you have to understand that that's not only based on a series of averages, it's also based on a technique. Now, the technique most often used now is to use the transit of Mercury across. However, the sun has not a solid surface like the Earth. You can't easily define between surface and sky. Therefore, any measurements of the sun have to be a little bit elastic. And so if you, some people might do a front page Google search and go, oh, it's not 800, it's 865,000, blah, blah, blah. You need to understand metrology and how these measurements are taken, and that there is a margin of error, which is also has to be considered the margin of definition, because the technique and your definition of what defines the surface of the sun changes it by 1,000 miles either way. This is as good as you want to get. If you quote 864,000 miles has the diameter of the sun, only the most pedantic person would argue, and they were using these measurements in the early age of the space race, before the satellite age and before laser techniques. So these measurements are effective. These are another one, 1080 hand. Okay, we have the radius of the moon is 1,080 miles. If we multiply the diameter of the moon by 108, we get the distance from moon to the earth. If we multiply the earth by 108, we get the diameter of the sun. If we multiply the diameter of the sun by 108, we get the distance from the sun to the earth. It's part of this beautiful, exquisite system. These can be measured and checked. That's Aldar HQ, 153. 153, the miraculous draft of fishes. We'll see, 153 in forget the name of the cathedral, the large cathedral in Washington is 153 yards long. The main cathedral in Petrópolis in Brazil, which is very important because of the connection later to Brasilia and colonial architecture in a way. But anyway, Petrópolis Cathedral, 153 cubits long. The Sydney Masonic Centre, we look at the art installation on the front, doesn't look like much, 17 wide, 9 high, 153. You'll see it again and again. It is one of the essentials of this building and of the secret commas is that it's not more wide known, because this system, it's wonderful the way that the numbers and stuff connect together. And a quick example of that is well, we'll list the numbers here, and I'll just, okay, like for instance, 108, 1440, 432, 666, 000, 153. Okay, the Hashad numbers, it's in number theory, in recreational number theory, if basically it's 1 plus 5 plus 3 equals 9. 153 divided by 9 equals 17. It's divisible by 9, so the sum of the digits is divisible back into the number itself. 666, so we can forget about the zeros. 6 plus 6 equals 18. We can divide 666 by 18, so it's a Hashad number, but of course 1 plus 8 equals 9. So all these numbers, 4 plus 3 plus 2 equals 9, 1 plus 4 plus 4 equals 9, and you get the picture now. So this is one, so 9 is a number that's always underneath these, and we go back to 153, 1 plus 5 plus 3 is 9, 153 divided by 9 is 17. Now we look at triangular numbers. So what do? We find that 153 is a triangular number, and it's on the 17th, it's the 17th triangular number. 153 divided by 9 is 17, it's the 17th triangular. Now I'll whack up a card on the importance of why number 153 is such a beautiful number. Another example is it's the smallest narcissistic number, which means 1 cubed plus 5 cubed plus 3 cubed equals 153. And okay, I'll put some graphics up rather than go through all of that. And so 153, Pythagorean tuning, 666, literally built into the framework, as well as being part of the overall structure because of its hexagonal origins, and it's built on the pentagon, from which we can get proportions of phi. So yes, so Aldar HQ, Abu Dhabi, built in 2010, designed 2500 BC, let's say. The Grande Arch in Paris on the axis of the historic is the same height, has multiple other references that will come back to this, and the Louvre Pyramid, which is on the axis of the historic, both off 6 degrees, encodes this number 153. I've had a look at some other buildings in Abu Dhabi, and there's no shortage of the recent construction to show that even in the Islamic world, the Christian world, the Buddhist world, for instance, the new big Buddhist statue in China being 153 meters tall, but 153 meters tall overall, including the base, but 108 meters just for the Buddha. So Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, all these big religions, they're all using this. They used it a long time ago, and they're using it today. Esoteric, occult, spooky, supernatural stuff, whatever you want to call it, it's a fact of life, and it's a measurable fact of life. And it's not just a building, it's also in the street plan. So I live in Sydney. I've discovered what the meaning, the street plan of Sydney went on to prosper across Australia, and was again now later picked up in New Zealand, Canada and America, built on the same system of harmonics, of a combination of astronomy, geometry, arithmetic and music, and there it is. Anyway, there you go. Hope you enjoyed.